can you send it to us? Because I'm already
We will now resume in public. There we go. So we would like to, oh, there we go.
I wanted to be, I'm a friendly Canadian.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So the committee will now begin its examination of the main estimates 2019-2020. As members are aware, we will hear from the Minister of Foreign Affairs today, followed by the Minister of International Development on Thursday. I would very much like to welcome back to the committee the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Welcome to Foreign Affairs Committee, Minister. With her today from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, our Deputy Minister Marta Morgan, whom we'd like to welcome to your new role. Chief Financial Officer and Assistant Deputy Minister of Corporate Planning, Finance and Information Technology, Mr. Arun Thangaraj, and Assistant Deputy Minister Trade Policy and Negotiations, Mr. Steve Verhoeven. With that, I would like to pass the floor to Minister Freeland. Please provide us your remarks, and then, of course, we'll open up to questions from all members and colleagues for you. Thank you, Minister.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, everyone. Bonjour à tous. J'aimerais commencer par reconnaître que nous sommes réunis sur le territoire traditionnel non cédé du peuple algonquin-anishinaabe. Monsieur le Président, honorables collègues, je vous remercie de m'avoir invité à comparaître devant le Comité permanent des affaires étrangères et du développement international pour passer brièvement en revue certaines des priorités de notre gouvernement en matière de politique étrangère, ainsi que l'important travail que nous continuons d'accomplir pour relever aux défis auxquels le Canada et le monde sont confrontés. Alors que nous approchons de la fin de cette session parlementaire, j'aimerais également exprimer ma gratitude à tous les membres du comité pour le travail que vous avez entrepris au cours des dernières années à l'appui de la politique étrangère du Canada. And let me also introduce the extremely able team of public servants who are here serving all of us today. Marta Morgan, newly appointed Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I think this is your first public outing.
It is.
And Marta is, I believe, the first woman Deputy Minister of Global Affairs, so congratulations. It's great. Arun Thangaraj, who is our Chief Financial Officer. He is the guy who keeps the trains running on time. It's a huge department. You do a great job, Arun. Thank you also. And the man who needs no introduction, Steve Verhuel, our Chief NAFTA Negotiator, and CETA, and T3 too. Having recently attended meetings of the Arctic Council in Finland, I would also like to take the opportunity to publicly thank the members of this committee for their shared, collective, I would say, cross-party leadership on the Arctic and for the excellent report and recommendations. The most pressing issues facing the Arctic, such as climate change and advancing the interests of Indigenous people in the North, require broader public attention, and your work has helped to advance these important issues. Thank you very much. Very impressive. Around the world, we see a growing trend of leaders and of voters who question the value of the rules-based international order, and indeed of liberal democracy itself. That's why countries like Canada, who believe in liberal democracy and the rules-based international order, now need to fight back. Doing so is vitally important to our national interest. Canada, with just 36 million Canadians, can never thrive in a great power world where might makes right. That's why Canada today is one of the most ardent defenders in the world of liberal democracy and the rules-based international order. Earlier this spring, I represented Canada at ministerial meetings of two of the most important multilateral institutions of which Canada is a member, NATO and the G7. These gatherings offer the opportunity to reiterate Canada's strong support for the rules-based international order, to discuss how we can further work together to defend this order from malign foreign interference and the rise of authoritarianism, and to discuss how, working together, we can solve some of the greatest global challenges of our time, like climate change, the hollowing out of the Western industrial middle class, and global refugee crises. Permettez-moi de souligner certains domaines clés dans lesquels le Canada travaille concrètement à la défense et au maintien de l'ordre international fondé sur des règles, à commencer par le commerce. Le commerce fondé sur des règles ne garantit pas la paix entre les nations et ne rend pas le système multilatéral infaillible, mais il l'aide. And that is why working together for free trade is essential. Last fall, Canada concluded negotiations on the new NAFTA with the US and Mexico. In November, we signed the agreement on the margins of the G20 summit in Argentina. Throughout our intense negotiations, we stayed focused on what really matters to Canadians: jobs, growth, expanding the middle class. We held out for a good deal, and that's what we got. We guaranteed continued access to our largest export market for Canadian workers and Canadian businesses, and we succeeded in preserving key elements of NAFTA, including Chapter 19, the all-important dispute settlement mechanism, and the cultural exception. We addressed important bread and butter issues by cutting red tape to make it easier for Canadian businesses to export to the U.S. market. Despite this success, one major hurdle remained: the U.S. Section 232 national security, steel, and aluminum tariffs. When the U.S. imposed tariffs, Canada retaliated, imposing dollar-for-dollar countermeasures. And we stood firm in our position that these tariffs were not appropriate between two countries that, in addition to being important national security partners and allies, also had a free trade agreement. This was a point we made clearly to the U.S. administration, to members of Congress, and to labor and business leaders south of the border. Le résultat. Il y a un peu plus d'une semaine, le Canada a réussi à négocier la levée complète des tarifs imposés par les États-Unis. Comme je l'ai dit la semaine dernière en visitant des travailleurs canadiens de l'acier et de l'aluminium à Regina et au Saguenay, voici la raison pour laquelle nous avons réussi. Nous savions que les faits étaient de notre côté. Nous savons que nous ne représentons pas un risque pour la sécurité nationale des États-Unis. Nous savions que notre commerce de l'acier avec les États-Unis est équilibré. Nous sommes restés unis, nous avons été patientes, nous étions persévérantes. The result? Canada successfully negotiated a full lift of the tariffs just over a week ago. Here is why we succeeded. We knew the facts were on our side. We know that we are not a national security risk to the United States. We know that our trade in steel with the United States is balanced. We stayed united, we were patient, and we were persistent. I think persistence and unity are some great Canadian values, and I'm really proud of the way our whole country came together in this effort. Our government's position was that it would be difficult to move ahead with the ratification of the new NAFTA while the tariffs were in place. Now that the tariffs have been lifted, our government intends to move ahead with ratification. We know that having the new NAFTA ratified will provide economic certainty for Canadians. Elsewhere in the world, Canada is using its voice to advocate for the rules-based international order. I recently traveled to Kyiv following the presidential elections in Ukraine. This was an opportunity for me to meet with the newly elected President Volodymyr Zelensky. I reiterated Canada's continued support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as our commitment to continue working with the international community to maintain pressure on Russia. To support elections and democracy in Ukraine, our government contributed short and long-term election observers as part of a Canadian election observation mission. It has been very ably led by former Foreign Minister Lloyd Axworthy. Our observers will be back for the parliamentary elections in July. We've also provided a $2.8 million assistance package to counter foreign disinformation in the Ukrainian parliamentary elections and presidential elections now passed. In another important show of support for Ukraine, on March 15th, Canada, the EU, and the US announced new sanctions in response to Russia's aggressive actions in the Black Sea and the Kerch Strait, and Russia's illegal annexation and ongoing occupation of Crimea. I was also pleased to announce a 3-year extension of our training mission to Ukraine, Operation Unifier, through which Canadian soldiers have helped to train more than 11,000 Canadian troops. And I've heard firsthand about how valuable that training has been. Russian aggression to Crimea and eastern Ukraine poses an existential threat to Ukraine. At the same time, Ukraine faces serious domestic challenges, particularly the need to reform its post-Soviet economy. To support this work, Canada will host the 3rd annual International Ukraine Reform Conference early this summer in Toronto. L'année dernière, le Canada a déployé environ 1 000 soldats canadiens pour assurer la sécurité de l'OTAN et de la sécurité euro-atlantique, notamment sous la direction de la mission de l'OTAN en Irak et du groupement tactique de la présence avancée renforcée de l'OTAN en Lettonie, de la police aérienne en Roumanie et de notre soutien militaire à l'Ukraine. Le Canada est fier de diriger la mission de l'OTAN en Irak. Dans le cadre de cette mission d'instruction et de renforcement de capacités ne comportant aucune composante de combat, l'OTAN soutient les efforts visant à former les forces de sécurité irakiennes dans leurs efforts pour empêcher la réémergence du Daesh et d'autres groupes terroristes. En ce qui concerne le maintien de la paix, les Nations Unies et les pays partenaires appuient fortement et publiquement le travail du Canada. Lors de la récente réunion ministérielle des Nations Unies sur le maintien de la paix, le secrétaire général a fait l'éloge de la contribution canadienne, en particulier de l'initiative LC visant à accroître la participation significative des femmes aux opérations de la paix. In our own hemisphere, the world has watched with great concern as Venezuela, under Nicolás Maduro's rule, has systematically dismantled democratic institutions and violated human rights. The Maduro regime has created a political, economic, and humanitarian crisis. The result, millions have fled the country, and millions more are suffering due to severe shortages of food, medicine, and the basic necessities of life. Canada has been leading on this issue alongside our partners, the other members of the Lima Group, which has met 13 times since its formation in August 2017. The members of the Lima Group are Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Guyana, Honduras, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, and St. Lucia. These countries joined, indeed led, almost 50 others around the world in recognizing Juan Guaidó as the interim president in line with the Venezuelan constitution. 2 weeks ago, I was in Havana, Cuba, to meet to discuss the economic, political, and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela and the work we can undertake together to address it. We will continue to support the path forward outlined by the National Assembly and interim President Guaidó and to oppose outside military intervention. A peaceful transition of power needs to be led by Venezuelans themselves. Last fall, the House of Commons recognized that the violence perpetrated against the Rohingya by Myanmar's security forces constitutes genocide. I commend many members of this committee for your leadership on this issue, and I would also like to recognize the work of Bob Rae, who was appointed Canada's Special Envoy to Myanmar and published an important report on his work and findings there. The atrocities committed against the Rohingya, including terrible sexual violence, have led nearly 1 million Rohingya to flee the country into neighboring Bangladesh. Canada has committed $300 million over 3 years for humanitarian assistance, development, and peace and stabilization efforts, and we will continue to work with our allies and partners, very much including Bangladesh, to resolve the crisis and ensure justice for the survivors of this genocide. In our work to support liberal democracy and the rules-based international order, we recognize that we are most effective when we work together with like-minded partners. That is why we are so pleased that Canada will be joining the UK in co-hosting the first global conference for media freedom in the UK in July. We will be working together to further advance the cause of a free and independent press globally, such an important pillar of liberal democracy. Mr. Chair, I would like to end on a difficult but important note. I am sure members of this committee, like all Canadians, are concerned by the arbitrary detentions of Canadians in China. This is indeed a difficult time in our relationship with China. Chinese officials have been clear that, from their perspective, these difficulties began with an extradition request from the United States. We complied, as we are committed to doing under our extradition treaty with the United States, in place since 1976. I am confident that was the right thing to do, and I am confident Canadians know that. We are a rule of law country, and we are a country that honors our treaty commitments. This was not a political decision, it was not a political message, and there has been no political involvement. Nous condamnons fermement l'arrestation arbitraire de Michael Kovrig et de Michael Spavor. Le gouvernement du Canada continue de réclamer leur libération immédiate. Je tiens à réaffirmer à tout le monde ici que c'est une priorité absolue pour le Premier ministre, pour l'ensemble de notre gouvernement et pour moi personnellement. We strongly condemn the arbitrary arrest of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. The Government of Canada continues to call for their immediate release. I want to assure everyone here and everyone listening that this is a top priority for the Prime Minister, for our whole government, and for me personally. Many countries share our concern, and we have rallied an unprecedented number of partners around the world in support of Canada's position. Canada continues to express its appreciation to those who have spoken in support of these detained Canadians and the rule of law, including Australia, Denmark, Estonia, France, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Spain, the United Kingdom, the United States, as well as the EU, the G7, and NATO. Our government is seized of these cases and is using any and every opportunity to raise them with our allies and partners. Here and in China, we have made our position clear to the Chinese authorities, and just last week, my parliamentary secretary, Rob Oliphant, was in China as part of a parliamentary delegation where he raised this issue directly with the officials he met. Thank you for doing that, Rob. We will continue to advocate on behalf of these brave Canadians. And in conclusion, I do want to say how much sympathy I have for the Spavor and Kovrig families. They are supporting both Michaels with incredible grace and determination. Sur ce, je serai heureuse de répondre à vos questions. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister Freeland. Just before I open the floor to questions, just want to remind members we're going to stick tightly to the 6-minute per question time frame, and I will give a 30-second warning as the clock's ticking down, just so that the answers can be kind of brought to a close at that point. And with that and without delay, we shall move to MP O'Toole, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for appearing, Minister. Canadians are keeping Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor in our thoughts and their families. Certainly, there's very minimal consular access to them each month. Can you update Canadians on their well-being?
Thank you for the question, Aaron, and I'm very glad that we're starting with that issue. The consular access is limited, but it exists. I have reports immediately after the consular visits. I would like to say that one of the things that we do, that Mr. Kovrig and Mr. Spavor both ask for, is to hear about the continued efforts we're making on their behalf. I hear after every visit that it makes a real difference to them to know that we are fighting for them and standing up for them, and to know what we are doing. I would also like to say, and really pay tribute to both of them. The situation is very difficult. Both of them are incredibly resourceful, incredibly brave, and are handling themselves under highly inappropriate circumstances very, very well. And then finally, I do want to thank the Canadian diplomats in China who are providing very strong consular support for the two Michaels in what are also difficult circumstances for our diplomats.
Thank you. In late November, the Prime Minister was advised about the extradition arrest that would take place of Meng Wanzhou. On December 1st, the arrest took place. On December 5th, the arrest became public. On what date did you reach out to your counterpart to talk about the extradition and the process that would be followed?
So just to speak for a moment about the extradition process. I'm going to speak for a moment about the extradition process because that's a very important point also for our Chinese interlocutors. And I'd like to take the opportunity again to point out, and this has very important bearing on the circumstances of the two Canadians, that as everyone on this committee knows, that is not a political process. It is a question of rule of law. It is a question of Canada honoring its treaty commitments. And there was, as has been said clearly, but I think it's really important for our Chinese interlocutors to understand this was not a political decision, and there was no political interference. We immediately ensured that Ms. Meng had consular access provided to her. That was a very important point. It was important for the Chinese authorities to be able to have access to her, just as it is important for us to have access to our detained Canadians. So there was an immediate outreach and contact with the Chinese authorities. When it comes to my contacts with my counterparts, with my Chinese counterparts, I have spoken on a few occasions directly with the Chinese ambassador to Canada. I would be happy at any time to have a direct conversation with Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister. We have been clear with the Chinese authorities that we are prepared for that conversation at any time. And I'm happy to offer that invitation at another
Minister,
time
I didn't
now.
get a date in that response. Last week on CBC Radio, you reached out to the Chinese government, but I'm wondering whether in the days following the arrest, the Prime Minister was briefed about the arrest ahead of time because they knew it was going to be a diplomatic dispute. When did you reach out to your counterpart to allay concerns, to talk about our extradition process directly to address the issue, or at least after the detention of our citizens?
So in fact, our outreach to China happened before the detention of the Canadians. Our outreach to China happened immediately upon the detention of Ms. Meng, as is appropriate.
Now that conflicts with what Ambassador McCallum told us. Now, I can't talk about it, it was in camera, but that conflicts with it.
Probably it's not very appropriate to talk about in-camera conversations, but at any rate, I wasn't present for those. So let me simply say, as is best practice, and as Canada always does, upon the detention of Ms. Meng, Chinese authorities were immediately engaged because they were offered consular access to her. That is how we expect Canadians to be treated when they are detained abroad, and that is what we do for all detained foreign nationals in our country. So hang on, Aaron. So the Chinese authorities were immediately engaged in that way. When it comes to an engagement at other levels, let me be very clear with Canadians and also to reiterate to the Chinese authorities.
30 seconds.
I am ready, indeed I would be very happy at any time to speak to my Chinese counterpart.
So
Hang on,
counterpart in 6 months.
Hang on, Aaron. It is our understanding that in these situations, the Chinese practice tends to be, and Canada is not the only country that has found itself in this situation, the Chinese practice tends to be to hold off on meetings at the highest level.
Thank you, Minister Freeland. Thank you. We will now move to MP Bayliss, please.
Thank you. Merci. Bonjour, Ministre Freeland. J'ai une question concernant les renégociations de l'ALENA. Et premièrement, j'aimerais vous féliciter pour une grande réussite sur ces négociations. Nous savons que l'accès au marché des États-Unis est primordial pour nos entreprises et notre économie. Et à ce sujet-là, j'aimerais comprendre, est-ce que tu pourrais nous mettre à jour avec où ce qu'on est avec l'ALENA et pourquoi c'était si important, je dois le dire, de préserver cet accès au marché américain?
Merci Frank pour cette importante question. Et je voudrais commencer en publiquement, encore une fois, remercier Steve Verheuel et toute l'équipe des négociateurs canadiens. Nos négociateurs sont vraiment les meilleurs du monde. Je pense que je peux confier un moment pendant les négociations quand une des négociateurs qui travaille avec Steve m'a dit, you know, we're like the Navy SEALs of Canada. C'était après une très longue journée à Washington. Et vraiment, tous les Canadiens doivent être fiers de le niveau de professionnalisme, du patriotisme de nos négociateurs professionnels. Et c'est un privilège et un honneur pour moi de travailler avec Steve et son équipe. Concernant le nouvel ALENA, je veux aussi souligner deux choses qui sont importantes pour les Canadiens. Notre priorité était toujours de maintenir l'accès au marché américain. Nous avons à ce moment-là cet accès parce que nous avons l'accord du ALENA. Cet accord est maintenant en vigueur et ça nous donne de très grandes opportunités économiques. Comme tout le monde sait, cet accès était menacé à cause du désir des Américains d'avoir une nouvelle négociation, une modernisation. Et on a réussi à négocier un nouvel accord qui nous donnera, qui nous permettra de maintenir l'accès au marché américain, qui est si important pour nous. Comme j'ai dit aussi dans mon discours, deux choses très importantes pour nous pendant les négociations étaient de maintenir le chapitre 19. C'est très important pour toutes les industries canadiennes, mais peut-être surtout l'industrie du bois d'œuvre. Et nous avons aussi maintenir l'exception culturelle, aussi une chose importante pour tous les Canadiens. Et même pour les anglophones, c'est important.
There was, when in your negotiations, there was something I thought was quite prescient that you picked up on, which is now becoming a threat to the rest of the world. A couple of weeks ago, the American president laid the groundwork for another executive order, another 232, national security threat, put tariffs on automobiles. It's my understanding that you pre-saw that, or you foresaw that, if I could see, and you took some actions with a side letter that, if I understand correctly, will maybe protect our Canadian automotive industry or steer us clear of that. Can you explain what that side letter is about and how that might help us given this new threat?
I certainly can, Frank. I would be happy to do so. Steve and I spent quite a lot of time on that side letter, as did a much broader group. And maybe this is an opportunity for me to single out for his extremely hard work on the car issue, Martin Thornell, who is our rules of origin negotiator and is a really brilliant person and very, very committed. On the car sector in general, I do also want to take this opportunity to thank Flavio Volpe, to thank the Canadian car companies and car parts manufacturers, and to thank the union leaders, all of whom we worked with very, very closely on this effort. And in fact, as the final details of the side letter were being negotiated, Steve and I were on the phone constantly, sort of hour by hour, with these people, and they really helped us shape the final agreement. The side letter, another important thing for people to understand is it has entered into force already. So it was signed on November 30th in Argentina by me and Ambassador Lighthizer. It now applies. And that's a very important point for... Yeah, I think that's what you're getting at, Frank, and it's a really important point because as the United States has said publicly, the U.S. 232 investigation on cars is now complete, and the U.S. has said that over the next 6 months they want to have negotiations with Japan and the European Union. The Canadian car sector is safe.
30 seconds.
Because that side letter is essentially an insurance policy, which means that in event of 232 action, our industry would not be affected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We shall now move to MP Caron, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. Bienvenue, Madame la Ministre. Une question rapide. Le 25 octobre 2018, le Premier ministre avait annoncé qu'il réviserait, ou que le gouvernement réviserait l'ensemble des permis d'exportation d'armes vers l'Arabie saoudite. Ça fait déjà 7 mois que ça a été annoncé. Ça a été annoncé dans la foulée de l'assassinat de M. Khashoggi. Où en êtes-vous avec la révision des permis d'exportation?
Merci pour la question. Et bienvenue au comité. Je pense que c'est la première fois qu'on discute au niveau du comité. Je peux vous assurer que du moment du meurtre, de l'assassinat de M. Khashoggi, des nouvelles permis d'exportation vers l'Arabie saoudite n'étaient pas signés. On a dit qu'on fera ça et c'est ce qu'on a fait et qu'on continue de faire. C'est vraiment un enjeu très sérieux. Nous le prenons au sérieux. Et comme vous avez dit, nous examinons maintenant la situation. Je veux aussi souligner, si je peux, quelque chose d'important. Une est le travail de Agnès Calamar, la rapporteure spéciale des Nations Unies, qui fait maintenant une investigation sur le meurtre de Jamal Khashoggi. J'ai parlé avec Madame Calamar au téléphone, et j'ai aussi la rencontrée aux Nations Unies. Et nous appuyons son travail fortement.
Je ne veux pas nécessairement parler de M. Khashoggi maintenant, mais je n'ai pas eu de réponse encore à la question. Je sais qu'il n'y a pas eu de nouveau permis d'exportation. Ça a été la première annonce. La deuxième annonce, en même temps, c'était qu'il y aurait une révision des permis existants de l'exportation d'armes en Arabie saoudite. Ça fait déjà 7 mois que ça a été annoncé. Le Parlement n'a toujours aucune idée où en est ce processus de révision. Je vous rappellerai que l'Allemagne, la Finlande, le Danemark et les Pays-Bas ont procédé à une suspension de la vente d'armes, malgré le fait qu'ils avaient déjà des contrats existants. Alors, je répète ma question. Où en est la révision des permis d'exportation d'armes à l'Arabie saoudite?
C'est une importante question. Et un élément de révision, c'est les investigations concernant la mort de Jamal Khashoggi. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle j'ai parlé du travail d'Agnès Calamar. Aussi, cette conférence concernant les droits de la presse en Angleterre, duquel j'ai parlé, une des inspirations pour cette conférence est la mort de Jamal Khashoggi. Et moi et Jeremy Hunt, le secrétaire des États étrangers de Grande-Bretagne, on annoncé la conférence en France pendant la réunion de G7. Nous avons parlé du meurtre de Jamal Khashoggi comme une inspiration pour la conférence. Un autre élément sur lequel nous travaillons très fort, qui fait partie de cette grande question, comme vous savez, et comme vous avez parlé dans la Chambre, c'est la guerre au Yémen, qui fait une grande partie de cette question. J'ai parlé il y a quelques semaines avec Martin Griffiths. Le Canada est très engagé dans le processus à tête avec M. Griffiths pour chercher une cessez-le-feu, une paix au Yémen.
Comprenez-moi, je comprends entièrement la situation, mais on fait face, et je sais bien que vous apportiez la question du Yémen, parce que ce n'est pas uniquement le meurtre de M. Khashoggi qui est en jeu également, c'est le fait que ces armes sont utilisées non seulement contre leur propre population, mais également dans le conflit au Yémen. Et c'est utilisé, entre autres, et je trouve ça paradoxal, parce qu'on utilise... L'Arabie saoudite utilise les armes que nous envoyons là-bas pour bloquer les ports et faire un embargo sur l'aide humanitaire qu'on veut envoyer au Yémen. Et pour moi, c'est problématique. Et j'arrive difficilement à comprendre comment le Canada peut prendre plus de 7 mois à réviser les permis d'exportation d'armes, alors que notre partenaire, l'Allemagne, qui a d'importants contrats de vente en Arabie saoudite, a suspendu immédiatement et a prolongé la suspension de la vente d'armes. Alors, il y a une question des droits de la personne. Droits de la personne en ce qui a trait, évidemment, à M. Khashoggi. Droits de la personne en ce qui a trait au conflit au Yémen, où je vous rappellerai qu'il y a plus de 22 millions de personnes qui sont déplacées, qui ont été victimes du conflit. Et pendant ce temps-là, on est encore en train de réviser un permis d'exportation d'armes en Arabie saoudite. Et cette révision a été faite, en fait, je vous rappellerai, après que M. Trudeau, après que le premier ministre ait mentionné que ça coûterait trop cher de rompre le contrat, et après que vous ayez été cité dans une radio en disant qu'il est très important que le Canada soit un partenaire de confiance dans le monde
30 seconds.
sur une période de temps plus longue que celle garantie par les cycles électoraux, en parlant de la vente d'armes en Arabie saoudite.
30 secondes, tu as dit ou?
There's 20 seconds remaining
ok.
in the answer.
Je vais dire deux choses alors. Je partage votre inquiétude concernant la guerre au Yémen. Et je pense que c'est un très important jeu, un très important élément de cette discussion. Pour cette raison, le Canada est très engagé. Et je veux souligner, parce que c'est important, que commençons avec
time,
la
Minister,
meurtre
sir.
du Jamal. Est-ce que je peux finir? Commençons avec la meurtre du Jamal Khashoggi. Commençons avec ce moment-là. Des nouvelles permis d'exportation n'étaient pas signés. C'est important.
Merci. Next up is MP Sidhu, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, to come in front of the committee this morning. I'm pretty sure most Canadians across the country are very thankful to you on your hard work on steel and aluminum tariffs. Your persistence, effort, and engagement with U.S. resulted in Canadians securing a full removal of U.S. 232 tariffs without quotas. Only Mexico and Canada, actually, the tariffs were lifted in these two countries. It's not big, but it's a very unique accomplishment. Since everything is said and done, can you share some of the strategies that were used during the negotiations with U.S.?
Thank you for the question, Jody. I am very happy to talk about this. And maybe I'll start actually with a phone conversation I had this morning before coming to the committee, where I had a chance to speak to Secretary Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State. Because the national security tariffs were levied on, because the 232 tariffs are on national security grounds, this was an issue which it was appropriate to raise with the Secretary of State. And also, I do want to thank my colleague, Harj Sajjan, who raised the issue very effectively with the Pentagon. And this morning, I had the chance to thank Secretary Pompeo for the work he did on this, which I think was considerable. Look, I think this is really a story of our country being united, of our country being persistent, of our country understanding that facts matter, and of our country being resolute. I think the lifting of the tariffs actually started, you guys should talk to Steve afterwards, so I'm interested in his views. I think it started on the 1st of July. When our retaliatory measures took effect. That is the largest trade action that Canada has taken since the Second World War. It was a clear sign that Canada would act in response. And I think it was also important that we took that action as I believe the Prime Minister put it at the time, more in sorrow than in anger. That we understood that that action was harmful to everybody, that having tariffs between Canada and the U.S. Just made no sense and hurt people on both sides of the border. And
Thank you
that,
for touching that, by the way, the retaliatory measures, how important they were actually during the negotiations.
I think the fact that we acted strongly from the outset was absolutely essential. I know there were voices in Canada who called on us to drop the retaliation publicly. I'm glad we didn't listen to those voices. The retaliation, was difficult. It was difficult to stay the course, but that was absolutely essential. And I do want to thank another person. I'd like to just mention a couple other things. We were able to work very, very closely with the leaders of the steel and aluminum sectors, both industry and also unions. We had a meeting of the steel CEOs last Friday in Toronto, and they said to me and Steve was there, so was Ambassador McNaughton, they said that they would miss our sometimes nearly weekly Friday get-togethers. And I do really want to commend both of those sectors for doing the homework that was necessary for us to support them. They worked hard, they got together. I think I'd like to also mention Catherine Cobden. She is the head of the Steel Association, and she did a really good job of bringing those people together. And then a final person who I think it's worth mentioning is Senator Chuck Grassley, who is the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. He has been very clear about his view that the 232 tariffs needed to be lifted. He wrote an important op-ed in the Wall Street Journal on April 29th, where he said explicitly that NAFTA could not be ratified in the U.S. Senate as long as the tariffs were in place. And I think, I have been in close touch with Senator Grassley. I've met him twice in person and spoken to him often on the phone. Our ambassador, David McNaughton, and our embassy have been working closely with him and his staff. And his strong work, his strong credibility really also made an important difference. And I emphasize that because I think it's important for us to recognize a good trade deal.
30 seconds.
A good trade deal is win-win, and lifting the tariffs is good for both countries.
Minister, very quickly on the Columbia River Treaty negotiation with the U.S., since it's in British Columbia, I'm very keen to know, in 10 seconds, how we're making out with that. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry for letting my enthusiasm about 232 take over. The Columbia River Treaty is obviously an important treaty for BC in particular, but also for all of Canada. I was recently in Castlegar in the Columbia River Basin.
That's time.
And one important thing we were able to do and announce there is, for the first time in a Canadian treaty negotiation, the Indigenous people are, and we announced it there, will be represented at the table, sitting on the Canadian side.
Thank you, Minister.
With official observer status.
Thank you. And we will now move to MP Saini, please.
Good morning, Minister. Thank you very much for coming here this morning. Thank you to your colleagues also. I want to touch upon two topics that you mentioned in your opening comments. The first one with Venezuela. I'm sure you can appreciate all Canadians are concerned about the situation, the tragic situation that's happening in Venezuela right now. We appreciate the fact that Maduro seized power through fraudulent means, and it's a crisis. It's an international crisis that's slipping across the borders, especially with Colombia, as you can appreciate. And I know that Canada has taken a strong lead within the Lima Group. Can you update us to where we are, the stance that we've taken, and the leadership that we've shown within that group, and where we're going forward?
Thank you for the question. It's a really important issue. The situation in Venezuela is a tragedy. Venezuela was not so long ago among the richest countries in our hemisphere, and it has now been reduced to a terrible state of human misery. And there has been, by the Maduro regime, a systematic and intentional dismantling of Venezuelan democracy. And that is why we, the hemispheric partners of Venezuela, had to act, and we are acting. On a few specifics, I can announce a few things that are happening. Next Monday, June 3rd, we will have in New York a meeting of 3 countries of the Lima Group, Canada, Chile, and Peru, with the European-led ICG, led by Federica Mogherini. The Foreign Minister of Portugal will also be there. So that's an effort to continue our work with international partners. It's important because I think one of the really central positive facts in a tragic situation over the past few months, has been the very wide international recognition of Juan Guaido as the legitimate international president, interim president of Venezuela. And the European Union and European Union countries have been central in that. So it's an important meeting. We will also be having a meeting of the Lima Group in Guatemala on Thursday, the 6th of June, which I will be attending to continue the conversation. One of the issues that I discussed with Secretary Pompeo this morning was the situation in Venezuela, and we continue to be working closely with our American partners. I'd like to say for Canadians, two other aspects of this. I spoke about, and it is really a overwhelming concern of mine, which is the threat to liberal democracy in the world today and the rise of authoritarianism. Our hemisphere, in a world that is facing that challenge, our hemisphere has been doing pretty well. You could even describe our hemisphere as one of the refuges for liberal democracy in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons it is so important for Canada and for our hemispheric partners to stand up in support of democracy and human rights in Venezuela. Second element of the Lima Group I want to just quickly mention is I really think a key tool of diplomacy and foreign policy today and in the years to come is assembling multilateral coalitions of like-minded countries to work on pressing issues. The Lima Group is a fantastic example of that. And I'm really proud of the countries of our hemisphere coming together to do that work. So I really thank our Lima Group partners.
Final question, and this question is somewhat personal to me because I have not a sizable but a very active Rohingya community in my riding, and I've been engaged in this issue ever since the situation emerged in August of 2017. As you know, it's a genocide. It's a terrible situation in terms of human rights. You've had, almost 500,000 people that have been displaced, and I know that through our international development assistance and also through our foreign policy that we've also had significant effects of what's happening on the ground. Can you sort of update us to what we've been doing there?
I thank you for the question, and I do know about the Rohingya community in your community. It is a small but mighty Canadian community. I've met with leaders of that community, and I'm glad that you mentioned their specific work, because I think a strength of Canada is the fact that we have so many Canadians who are so personally connected and engaged with so many parts of the world. And I have learned a lot about the Rohingya from Canadian Rohingyas. I'm also really glad, and I'd like to say this to everyone on the committee, that our country and our parliament were able to acknowledge what has happened to the Rohingya as a genocide. It's a very important step, and I'm glad for us as a country we did it.
Thank you very much. And we will now move to MPO Tool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to follow up on